dystrophy and their caregiver would not qualify for the caregiver allowance.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the question. I'd be pleased to answer it. Of course, I don't know the specifics of the case you refer to, but a person may, in fact, not qualify for this program if their income is higher than the income cutoffs, if they're not getting 20 hours of care per week, and if when they're assessed on a very standardized assessment tool that is used as we assess for home care, as we assess for long-term care. We are using the same tool with respect to the caregiver's allowance. If they don't meet a level 5 in terms of what their care requirements are. Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Clare on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I will tell you what she was told. She was told that because her cognitive behavior is still functioning, she doesn't qualify. Marcelle can't bathe herself. She can't drink from a glass on her own. She can't get out of the house. She can't open a door. In essence, she has a high level of disability. One of the key requirements in the news release this government sent out on August 11, 2009. So on the Maple scale, she scored 3 out of 5. So my question to the Minister of Health, what does an individual need to do in order to score a 5 and qualify for the caregiver allowance program?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, I welcome the question because it gives me an opportunity to provide information to the members. Mr. Speaker, the MAPLE assessment is a standardized assessment tool that is used the world over to assess for long-term care, for home care, and for other services for people with disabilities or for seniors. It is a 5-stage assessment, Mr. Speaker, in terms of the level of care that one might require. And Mr. Speaker, to qualify for the caregivers program, one has to have the highest level of care needs, which is a level 5 on the assessment tool. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Clare on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, you either provide support and recognize the efforts of caregivers who are keeping individuals in their community for as long as possible, which is the very foundation of this program, or you put them in a costly facility. Worse yet, Mr. Speaker, what options would the province have if something happened to Marcelle's caregiver? So my final question to the Minister is, why have you raised the expectations of individuals with a high level of disability only to disappoint them with a rejection letter?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I really don't believe that this government raised anybody's expectations by fulfilling the commitment of a former government, which was advocated strongly for by the opposition. Mr. Speaker, we went forward with a program that people were expecting, which had been announced and which was in the former government's budget. And Mr. Speaker, we recognize that this program has its limitations in terms of who it was designed to assist, Mr. Speaker, and we are certainly evaluating that as we go forward to fulfill our own campaign promise, which is to introduce a caregivers program next year. Mr. Speaker, if the honourable member would like to provide me with the details of the case that he referred to, I would be happy to have our department review it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. The Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question through you is to the Minister of Health, and it deals again with continuing care allowance. Mr. Speaker, a constituent of mine of Victoria County, Joey Fraser, has heart disease, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, glaucoma, has had open heart surgery, his leg amputated below the knee, angina and cataracts, and is in need of care at his home. However, Mr. Speaker, applicants must be assessed a score of Maple 5, and they must have some combination of very poor memory, behavioural problems, risk of falls, or many challenges with managing their personal needs. Mr. Speaker, without a doubt, Mr. Fraser, as I previously mentioned, has trouble with managing his personal needs as he can't do his laundry, clean, or prepare any of his meals. My question to the Minister is, why would he be refused assistance under the caregiver allowance?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the question. And again, Mr. Speaker, I don't know the specifics of the case that the honourable member refers to, but Mr. Speaker, it's important for people to understand that before this program was introduced, the former government had a pilot project in the Department of Community Services that piloted this program. It was called in-home support, Mr. Speaker, and it operated in 2 areas of the province, Mr. Speaker, and it had the same criteria for the province-wide program that government announced, with one difference, Mr. Speaker, and that difference was that people didn't have to be on a list for awaiting homes for special care, meaning that they had the highest level of care requirements. There have been no changes in this program with respect to the criteria, except we have taken that one small barrier away. And Mr. Speaker, if people are feeling that they are improperly assessed, we will certainly have a look at that in the department. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes on his first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Fraser's daughter is distraught to know her father can't access this allowance. She even told me the other day, can't the government understand that caregivers are saving the healthcare system money? The Premier talked between May 5th and June 9th throughout the election campaign about the importance of seniors being able to stay in their homes. My question, Mr. Speaker, is will Mr. Fraser be able to get this caregiver's allowance and stay in his own home where he is the most comfortable?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, that's precisely why this government had, as part of its platform, a caregiver's allowance program, which we intend to bring forward in next year. And Mr. Speaker, I assure you, it will not be the flawed program that was designed by the former government and with the assistance of the opposition party.
The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes on his final supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, through you to the Minister, next year may be too late for Mr. Fraser. My question is, am I to take from everything you said in your answers both now and to other members that if I have Mr. Fraser's daughter called your office, that you will immediately look into this troubling situation?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, what I have said, and I will say clearly to the member through you, Mr. Speaker, is that if he has a constituent who feels they were improperly assessed and he wants to bring that to my attention, we will have it reviewed in the department. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, my question again is for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, clearly there are many people that have problems and see the limitations in this caregiver program which has been announced. The Minister herself has said today that she recognizes there were limitations. She's used the word flawed program, and yet she herself rolled it out and allowed it to be introduced. Mr. Speaker, in my constituency I have a constituent whose name is Thelma Purcell. And she was very excited when she watched Live at 5 and saw the government's program discussed and introduced. She thought finally somebody recognized her commitment to looking after her husband, which she's been doing for 9 years on a 24-hour-a-day basis. She was excited, and she gave accolades to the government for doing just that. Now we hear it's not really their program, it's something else that they're not willing to take responsibility for. But Mr. Speaker, I want to go back to my first question to the minister, and that was when I asked her if she would table for us today the exact number of applicants that there have been to this program and how many, more importantly, how many have qualified to date.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for the question. The honourable member will know that the continuing care has been devolved into the DHAs. And so the applications are coming through the DHAs and the assessments are being done in the DHAs. And so to provide the honourable member with the information that she requested would mean that we would have to talk to the DHAs to get the up-to-date information for today. So I can't make that commitment at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker. But what I can say is that I do know that we had a tremendous number of applications for this program. And in fact, the people in the department were very interested in seeing and understanding the need that's out there in the community, Mr. Speaker. It gives us a way to quantify just how many people are caring for people that we didn't know about before, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park on her first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, in the case of my constituent, Thelma is looking after her husband, who has been insulin dependent for many years. He's wheelchair bound. He suffers from coronary artery disease. He has no use of the right side, including his arm and hand. Mr. Speaker, this is an individual who, without 24-hour care, would be in an institution, without a doubt. He would be costing far more for our system than the $400 a month that was offered or is supposed to be offered through this program. On August 12th, the minister, again in the press release, said that people in the province are looking for help now. And she took that dramatic step of announcing the program, putting it back on the website, bringing it to the attention of the public, particularly with a lot of PR. There was a PR overdrive to bring people to the awareness of this. And I would like to ask the minister if she did not consider in her rollout of this program just how severely disabled people are who are at level 3, and obviously that there would be a large number of people who would be left off and disappointed.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Surely the honourable member isn't suggesting that when this program was put in place that we provide no announcements about it, Mr. Speaker. How in the world would anybody know that there was a program if we didn't issue a press release, which is what we did, Mr. Speaker. We didn't hold any big dramatic rollout. We issued a press release. We said this program is now here. The information was on the website, and I think I did an interview with the Chronicle Herald and perhaps with Information Morning in Cape Breton, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park on her final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's important today in the House, after the number of questions we've had to the minister about this program, that we ask again that she undertake to provide to the House as soon as possible the answer on the number of people who have applied for this program and the number that she can verify that have been qualified to accept this program. I think that's very important that that question be asked one more time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to tell the honourable member and all members who are concerned about their constituents and their constituents getting the services that they need that we will look very closely at this program. We will learn from this program in terms of what its limitations are as we design the program for next year. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Agriculture. Mr. Speaker, to put it bluntly, the cattle producers are faced with a crisis. With a faltering economy, heavy competition from producers, other provinces and states, high fuel costs, and overall low profit ratios, many cattle farmers are faced with the real threat of shutting down their operations. Yet in the face of all this uncertainty, the Agriculture Minister has chosen not to live up to his word, or the previous government's commitment of $2 million in short-term sustainable funding. My question is, Mr. Speaker, why has this government and this minister turned its back on the cattle producers of Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very pleased to be able to answer this question for the member opposite. The reaction I've received from the cattle producers certainly isn't that I've turned their back on them. They seem to be quite positive, and quite positive with the government, and quite positive with this minister. And actually, Mr. Speaker, I met with them several times, and the president of the cattle producers, he and I have agreed to dialogue once a month to just stay updated on issues. As far as the previous government's commitment, there was none. Matter of fact, if the member opposite can identify where this letter signed by the former minister was typed and sent out from, because it didn't come from this Department of Agriculture, that when he was the minister, nobody in the department knows where it was generated. So Mr. Speaker, so I guess when almost every member who was in the government side of the previous government was a cabinet minister, they could run around the province during a campaign, make outlandish statements, and then that meant that they were all promises by the previous government.
The honourable member for Hants West on his first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the aftermath of this careless about-face by this government, why should the men and women of the Nova Scotia cattle producers in this province and their association believe what the government says and trust anything while they're not sharpening their pencils and writing the support that these people need to keep going and keep their operations alive?
The honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Mr. Speaker, it may take some time for cattle producers, the agricultural industry, and Nova Scotians in general to feel that they can endorse and support any comments by this government. And when we deliver on our promises, they'll see that. But I want to tell the member opposite that I have made a commitment to cattle producers to see what is possible to do for them. My staff has been working on a plan for them for short-term funding, and it's I'm hopeful actually in the next few days to be able to make some statement in that regard, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Hants West on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's clear that without action and leadership from this government, which we're not seeing to date, that time may soon run out for the farmers in this province, the men and women who are working hard to support us all. What's the government's plan to help support the cattle producers of this province? Time to tell us the story, Mr. Minister.
The honourable Minister Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, we think we do have the parts of the plan just about finalized. I've had some initial discussion with the cattle producers. It will not be a cockamamie plan like the previous government had shown to cattle producers. It'll be something that will actually have some impact for them, and I'm looking forward in the next short term to be able to announce something for cattle producers, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Energy. The Keep the Heat program has helped many low-income families struggling to pay their heating bills over the years. As the cold weather approaches, and I think all members must know by now that although it's warm outside during the day, it's already cold at night. Nova Scotians are asking whether this program will be available. My question for the Minister is, what are his plans for the Keep the Heat program?
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for the question. I have the pleasure of working closely with the people in the Conservative Nova Scotia and Energy Department, of course, when it comes to various programs. And some of those programs have had a wonderful response from Nova Scotians. We monitor the response that we get, the interest that's there. Of course, there's a budgetary type decision, some of the very things that the member opposite should pay attention to tomorrow, when he will be more fully aware of decisions that are based upon the fact there is a need, but there's also a need to make sure that we live within our means. Some of these programs are under review at this time, and I encourage the member opposite tomorrow during the budget to pay particular attention to some of these issues.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East on his first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Minister can be rest assured that I'll be paying attention to that part of the budget tomorrow. His remarks there sounded a bit like code, that they'll be cutting that program. So is the Minister suggesting that they are going to cut or reduce support for low-income families in Nova Scotia who need to fill their oil tank this winter?
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
I'd like to point out to the member opposite that this particular member has never spoken in code. We spoke clearly and respond to the issues and the questions that are answered. The question was asked whether these programs are under review. And you know, Mr. Speaker, I want you to know, and you know from your constituency, members opposite know, members of my caucus are aware of the fact that there are many programs which I have the responsibility for that have a huge response from Nova Scotians. And I want the member opposite to know that when it comes to the reviewing of programs, those programs will be based upon need, but they'll also be based upon the fact there are programs that this government continue to support, continue to fit within our budget. I'm looking forward to those comments and that discussion tomorrow after budget.
The Honourable Member from Dartmouth East on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prior to the election, the previous government had announced that individuals with an income level below $27,000 or below and families with an income level below $42,000 would qualify for a rebate for oil of up to $200. Low-income families are depending on this, and they're looking to fill their oil tanks very quickly. Mr. Minister, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, will these same individuals and families qualify under the program which will be in the budget tomorrow, and does the government plan to expand it so that low-income families still don't have to struggle quite as much to fill their oil tanks this winter?
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
I want the member from Dartmouth to be reassured to the fact that I hear from numerous members of my caucus constantly in taking care of low-income Nova Scotians. This party and this government has always been there in terms of advocating on behalf of them, and this party and this government will not forget those folks when it comes to making these tough decisions. I think it's important. I think, if I may continue, Mr. Speaker, I think also that during estimates debates, when we have the time to review each of these programs and to look at the ones that have had the most success, it'll be an interesting time for the member opposite to basically get his facts straight.
The Honourable Member for Yarmouth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Environment, through you, naturally, Mr. Speaker. In early September, the Minister of Environment and Fisheries and the Minister of Agriculture met with the concerned citizens from the Yarmouth area about a potential new mink ranch near Sloan's Lake. And Mr. Speaker, if I may, I invited both ministers to a public meeting earlier in August, and they both declined to come. But I tell you, Mr. Speaker, I have repeatedly asked for a moratorium on any future fur farming license in the Yarmouth area, until at least an environmental review is completed. Will this be done? Mr. Speaker, the residents of the local area, like myself, are on the record, and I will table this newspaper clipping asking for a moratorium until the review is completed. And Mr. Speaker, if I may, both ministers, through the local media, both ministers characterized the meeting as positive, and they believe that they are on the path to resolving the residents' concerns. Some residents, later on in the article,
Do you have a question,
some residents
member?
didn't feel as positive about the meeting, Mr. Speaker, about the ultimate goal for a moratorium in the Yarmouth area, Mr. Speaker.
Question, please.
My question is, will this be done, and if not, why?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. First of all, the member opposite needs to get his facts straight. The member opposite asked for a meeting, and we proceeded and we met with the residents of Batagan, the Yarmouth area, and also the Clyde River area. I also met. Mr. Speaker, I also met with the member opposite, and I also want to tell you a little background, Mr. Speaker. I spent 38 years on the water. I know the importance of water quality, and that's the first thing I've done as a minister to ensure that we have a stronger monitoring program on the Carleton watershed. I also spent 9 years in municipal government, Mr. Speaker, and I understand that the authority lies with municipal government. I spent 9 years on the opposite benches, and I observed the member opposite, who spent 11 years at the municipal level and spent 10 years in the government. I can assure you, Mr. Minister, that we have spent more on this particular topic in the 100 days that we have addressed this issue than the member opposite has done in the last.
Thank you. The honourable member for Yarmouth on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I can tell you, and I can tell all members of this House, that if there's a public meeting in my community, I will be there. And I have the backbone to stand up and support the people of my community, not like the two ministers that did not come to a public meeting that were requested personally by me to come to that meeting. If they want to have backroom meetings, they can go ahead and have them, Mr. Speaker. The citizens of my community are very concerned about the environment. And I'm going to ask the minister, you told the Yarmouth Vanguard that legislations and regulations concerning fur-bearing animals will not be enacted until at least next spring. If so, the new mink ranch, if it is constructed at Sloan's Lake, can you guarantee the residents of the area today that they will not have to be concerned about the blue-green algae entering the spring-fed Sloan's Lake?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I just want to point out that the blue and green algae, we have a number of them across the province as we speak. It's a natural occurrence. And I also want to point out that the member opposite had 21 years, 11 years at the municipal level. He had 10 years in the government to deal with this issue. And I can tell you that we have been in government for less than 100 days, and we have addressed this issue, and we met with the people. Thank you very much.
Order. Order, please. I'll recognize the honourable member from Yarmouth on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I guess lip service is what this government will be given. The people has asked for a short-term moratorium until this environmental study has been completed. That minister, a former warden for the Barrington area, the people of the Barrington area still have concern about the mink ranch and his home riding, that he will not address the concerns of the people. Well, I will stand up and I will talk to the people of Barrington and I will let them know, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to ask the member one more time. Will he stand in this place and tell the people of Yarmouth and the Barrington area that he will put a moratorium on until the environmental study has been completed? Yes or no, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
Again, Mr. Speaker, I welcome the opportunity, and I assure the members the member opposite has spent 21 years, had an opportunity to deal with this issue, has never, and we have dealt with this issue, and I ask you to defer this question to the Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Furr. Thank you.
The Honourable Minister of, the Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Quickly. No, you may sit down. I'll recognize the Honourable Member of Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If this keeps up, there'll be no time for me, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations. Mr. Speaker, these days the people of Cape Breton are angry. In particular, the people of Cape Breton Regional Municipality. They face many challenges: declining population, higher taxes, fewer services. And Mr. Speaker, they're facing them alone. They've had no help from this government to date. According to CBRM, they have been underfunded by the province to the tune of $20 million a year in equalization payments. So, Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister is that true? Is it true that the province is giving a better deal to some municipalities, but not even a fair deal to the Cape Breton Regional Municipality?
Order. I'll recognize the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for that question. There has been a commitment made by our government that we will be reviewing equalization with the municipalities and keeping in mind the context of being fiscally responsible. So we are going to be reviewing that.
I'll recognize the Honourable Member for Glace Bay on his first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure if that minister even knows where Cape Breton is right now. So what I'm going to do, Mr. Speaker, is ask my next question to the Premier. And the Premier has expressed some sympathy towards the people of CBRM on this matter, but the words are a little empty. CBRM has tried to appeal this inequality, but the NDP government, this government that ran a campaign on fairness, asked the Supreme Court to reject that very appeal. Mr. Speaker, the government owes it to the people of CBRM to stop talking and start doing something. So my question for the Premier is, when is he or his minister going to sit down with CBRM and discuss a fair distribution of equalization payments?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy to reply to the member for Glace Bay. I look forward to the opportunity to meet with the Mayor and Council at the CBRM. I, of course, know that the proposal that they put forward was through the UNSM. I think it's important that we respect the UNSM as the voice for municipalities, and we certainly intend to pursue this matter along with the study that UNSM did with them. Thank you. Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member from Glace Bay on his final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's, I think, at the stage where hollow words don't cut it anymore, Mr. Speaker, because the people of Cape Breton deserve a fair deal. They certainly aren't getting one right now. The Premier, Mr. Speaker, has, just sitting on his left right there, the self-appointed political minister of Cape Breton. Mr. Speaker, that very minister last night on CTV said that he knows, as a former negotiator, that at the end of the trail in negotiations, there's always a yes. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm asking the Premier, why don't you put your political minister on the next bus to Cape Breton and deliver that yes to the CBRM and the Mayor and Councillors?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member for Glace Bay should know that we intend to treat the municipalities in this province with respect. We intend to negotiate with them on the basis of the fact that they deliver many services that are important to the people of the province. We certainly understand that. We also understand that there are concerns around the question of equalization that was set out in the paper, that the report that came forward through the UNSM. We think it's appropriate to deal with them in that fashion, and that's what we're going to do. Hear, hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question for you is to the Minister of Justice. Mr. Speaker, the Minister knows that the province's Boots to the Street program has produced great outcomes at community and provincial levels with 150 officers in place and 35 more committed for this year. Communities are concerned about the current status of this government's commitment and especially the 10 positions in Cape Breton and 2 positions in New Glasgow. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister is simple. Does he intend to keep the commitments to these communities and provide the 12 committed positions?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for that question. It's a long afternoon sitting here, and I'm glad to have at least one question. So I look forward. Thank you. Thank you. The issue of police officers' boots in the streets has been a successful program, and as a former police officer, I enjoyed the pleasure of having those extra positions. The budget's coming out tomorrow. We'll wait to see what's read in there. As for the police officers in Cape Breton, we're presently at 197 per 100,000, which is above the national average. So there's plenty of boots in the street, but we will see what the future holds.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton North on his first supplementary.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And that was a very much a no from the Minister, and it's of great concern to the people of Cape Breton when 10 positions were committed for the community, 7 to the Cape Breton Regional Police Service, 3 for a Safer Streets and Communities Investigative Unit, of which furniture was bought. The RCMP selected the location, and if this Minister is waffling on that, and the 2 for his own community of New Glasgow, which included both Aboriginal liaison and youth policing, then these communities are going to be very concerned. I would like to point out to the Minister, as he would know, of the acute problems that have been in our area, the need for additional investigative policing, drugs policing, ports policing, mental health policing. And Mr. Speaker, if he walks away from that, there will be a lot of discourse in the community, and he'll be walking away from his own peers he used to work with. Mr. Speaker, will that Minister stand on his pins in this House and commit to honour the commitment to the policing of the 12 positions for Cape Breton as well as for New Glasgow?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you for the question. I am committed to policing. It's been my lifelong commitment, and from my professional career, I will continue to look at the needs of Nova Scotians, the needs of police officers and the community as a whole, and this government will commit to putting resources that are strategically focused to meet the needs of all Nova Scotians.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton North on his final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, as the Minister knows, when we were faced with the fiscal realities, it was 50 for this current year. We had to reduce that to 35. Of that, 10 were for Cape Breton, an investigative office. What he now also knows is the Cape Breton Regional Municipality hired those police officers. New Glasgow hired those police officers on that commitment. And Mr. Speaker, yes, the question is being called. The Deputy Premier knows in the community the concerns that are there. And Mr. Speaker, the real question is, will the Minister of Justice honour the commitment to these communities and give them the police they not only deserve, they need, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Well, having the pleasure be the Minister of Justice for the last 95 days, I've had the 96, and the nice thing is I had the pleasure and the opportunity to meet with all the chiefs of Nova Scotia and the RCMP and get a good, clear picture of what the needs and the priorities of this province are. And we are looking forward to the budget being settled tomorrow so that we can put the needs of Nova Scotia first and ensure the benefits to all taxpayers and the benefits of all people in the Cape Breton region, that they get the best quality care.
The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Natural Resources. Mr. Speaker, in early September, the Minister of Energy granted an exploration license to East Rock Resources Limited for an area that includes the Chignecto Game Sanctuary. Mr. Speaker, this is invasive activity into a region that is currently being evaluated as a possible protected area. My question to the minister, why did your government agree to this exploration license?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I have to say that the Department of Energy gave the exploration license, not Department of Natural Resources. We expect to get an application around seismic testing, whatever. That hasn't come yet. But it's our hope that in order to make informed decisions, that we actually know what our resources are.
The Honourable Member for Kings West on his first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, a public review of the province's game sanctuaries released in 2005 found most respondents wanted more protection for game sanctuaries. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to read a quote from the good member for Pictou West when he was in opposition from the fall of 2008. Why won't the minister listen to the results of his own department's consultation? My question to the minister, will you listen to the results of your department's consultations and offer protection for the Chignecto Game Sanctuary?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, I have to try to reassure, I think, the member opposite. The ecological possibilities of the Chignecto Game Sanctuary are important to the government. The Colin Stewart Forest Forum has identified part of this area as possible wilderness area. So I want the member to know that if it's possible that it can go through that process to become designated as a wilderness area or some parts of it, we'd be very, very interested in that. We're committed to meeting our 12% protected areas. So we'll follow this process along, and we'll monitor and put our regulations or desires in place on any license that request that comes to us in order to ensure that the areas that we deem to be the most sensitive are not impacted by anything that might happen at this point there.
The Honourable Member for Kings West on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do find some degree of comfort in that response from the minister. However, I will proceed from this line. Mr. Speaker, last year the previous government allowed East Rock to perform seismic testing in Chignecto, which was opposed by the NDP. Now the same company has been given permission to explore for oil and gas. This is another example of the NDP saying one thing, clearly doing another. They are neglecting their responsibilities as government, moving painfully slow toward the province's goal of meeting 12% protected area by 2015. My question to the minister, will your government offer full protection for Chignecto immediately?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure what the member means by full protection, but if he's thinking about protection of a wilderness area, he would know that that couldn't happen immediately. There is a process to do that, but we're interested in that property and what it can offer Nova Scotians, and so you know, we'll certainly be monitoring what happens there. We don't want to see anything that negatively impacts the significant features in that area.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is for the Minister of Fisheries. Mr. Speaker, the past season saw lobster prices at a near record low level. And at every step along the way, the NDP were there to criticize the previous government. They were there to promise the fishermen the moon. Yet, since the government took power, all they have done is remove the $40 fee for the permit. The permit's still in place, and that minister said it should be removed. The fee is there. Roadside vendors still have to get a permit. Hardly a game changer, if you ask me, Mr. Speaker. Now, my question to the minister is this. When will this government finally put it in words, his words, into action, and come through with the promises that you have made to the fishermen of this province? It's time for that minister to fish or cut bait.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I can make one promise as I stand in this historical house. I'm here to represent fishermen in the coastal communities of Nova Scotia. And we have addressed the issue of the vendor's permit, something that the member opposite introduced, and we removed that fee, Mr. Speaker. I look forward to dealing with all the fisheries issues, and I'll bring that forward to the member.
Order. Time for oral questions has expired. We'll move on now to opposition business for the day, and I'll recognize the opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, would you please call resolution number 36?
Resolution number 36. I'll recognize the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise and say a few words about resolution number 36. And I'll read the operative clause. It says, therefore, it be resolved that the Premier, recognizing that reducing gas tax in Amherst represents a better deal for some families and not all families. Mr. Speaker, as you're well aware, that our caucus has opposed gas regulation from the very beginning. We believed we would end up with this kind of a scenario, where you would end up treating some Nova Scotians differently than others, which has taken place. But what is being proposed in this resolution, is creating a further problem. Now, not only are we having a Nova Scotian paying higher prices than someone in New Brunswick, but with the suggestion coming from this government and from the member from Cumberland North is that one Nova Scotian should be paying less tax on gasoline than another Nova Scotian. Under the present regulation, as was mentioned by the minister, there are 6 zones in this province, but the tax charged on every litre of gas in the province of Nova Scotia is equal. We all pay the same regardless of where we are in the percentage-wise, Mr. Speaker. Close enough, right? Mr. Speaker, I want to remind the minister when she stood up and spoke, what are the things that determine the price of gas? And this is regulations which are in their department. The distance from the refinery gate to the proposed boundary of a zone, the volume of petroleum products sold to retailers during that period, and the innovations within the industry. Nowhere does it say taxation. Nowhere does it say that the government should have the right to reduce the tax on a litre of gasoline in one area as opposed to another, Mr. Speaker. The simplest way to solve the issue that is created on the border between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia is to scrap gas regulation as it exists today and allow the free market to set the price. Mr. Speaker, our caucus has always believed in the entrepreneurial spirit of Nova Scotians and the creativity of business people from one end of this province to the other to be able to generate revenue to keep their businesses open. Under this present system, what we are creating and what this new system will be creating is pitting one community against another. Can you imagine, Mr. Speaker, moving the border, telling the people of Amherst that really, for this specific situation, you're not really a Nova Scotian, or telling the people in Truro, you're different, we're going to charge you more for a litre of gas, even though you are closer to the refinery than the people in Yarmouth, or quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, closer than the people of Bridgetown, where I live. Does that make sense? It doesn't. What you do is you allow the competitive market to set the price. This Premier and this Minister know that this system has been flawed. Your department has in front of it 2 independent reports that clearly states gas regulation is taking millions of dollars out of the pockets of Nova Scotians on a regular basis. The only reason for it was to create price stability, which you know hasn't happened, and to prevent rural gas stations from closing. And Madam Minister, I would say to you, that hasn't happened either. What will determine whether or not a gas station stays open, regardless of what community they live in, will be whether that business creates a business model which will allow the consumers in this province to want to go in and purchase that product, whatever it is. creating regulations which artificially creates a price isn't what this province was built on. This province was built on allowing the entrepreneurial spirit of entrepreneurs to be able to generate traffic into their business, to be able to say, we are offering you a better service. We are offering you additional services. Not just by saying, if you are selling this product, we'll guarantee you a profit margin. When you guarantee someone a profit margin, that means the people of that community are paying more than they would be under a free market. It has been the history of our province and the history of this country that a competitive market always will and always has and always will give Nova Scotians and Canadians the most competitive price, the cheapest price, to allow our businesses to thrive and move forward. But whether you agree, and I know my colleagues next door here who have defended gas regulation, believed they were doing the right thing, and stood up and told Nova Scotians, we are going to treat and create a system across our province that we can at least defend, that treats all of us equally, whether you live in a zone, whichever zone you're living in. All of a sudden, we get into the election campaign. And then this idea that says, well, we're going to cut the motor fuel tax only on the border, only to a select few of Nova Scotians. How is that fair? How is that fair to Nova Scotians? I'm waiting for the response of this government to stand up in their place and tell us how cutting the taxes on gasoline in Amherst is fair to the people of Halifax. How is it fair to the people of Yarmouth? How is it fair to the people of Digby, who I might add, prior to gas regulation, had some of the cheapest gas in Nova Scotia? Because they had an entrepreneurial spirit in that community. They created competition. They made their businesses beyond just serving gas. They created traffic. They created a volume that would allow them to sustain their businesses. And I would suggest to you, Mr. Speaker, that it is the wrong direction of this government to now pit one Nova Scotia community against another, to treat one Nova Scotian differently than another. It is unfair. It is unjust, Mr. Speaker, and this government knows it. I would suggest before we go down the road of creating one Nova Scotia for those that live in Amherst and one for the rest of us, that you step back from this proposal and understand the damage you are doing to our province. Let's begin by the basic principle that each of us are created equal and should be treated equally inside of our own province. This idea that cutting the tax on the border will somehow stop Nova Scotians from going into New Brunswick may have some merit. But why will it stop the people who live on one side of that artificial border from leaving their community to go into the next community? It won't, Mr. Speaker. What it does, it is moving the problem from the border to an artificial border inside of our province. One that, instead of eliminating the problem, actually makes it more difficult to deal with, because you are creating one Nova Scotian citizen who then is being treated more differently than another one. I want to end with my few minutes that I have left, Mr. Speaker, to appeal to this government and to remind them, as I'm sure they're all well aware, that they have a majority government. So we can move away a little bit from the quick public policy pieces that may get you quick votes, may be good political moves, but do very little are poor pieces of public policy. And I would suggest to you that gas regulation, while it may have benefited you politically, is poor public policy. You have an opportunity to scrap gas regulation in its entirety. That's how you will deal with the issue on the border. That's how you will treat the people of Amherst the same as you will treat people of Halifax, the people of Yarmouth, and the people of Bridgetown. I would encourage that member from Cumberland North to speak to his minister and to speak to his premier to move away from the lunacy of this idea and move towards the idea of scrapping gas regulation, because he knows that the business owners in his community can compete. He knows that the men and women in Cumberland North are looking for a competitive environment, because they always have and they always will. They will find the solution to this problem, not the government benches. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister for Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, it's an honour for me to participate in this debate because it is a topic that I care deeply about. I also thank the honourable member opposite for his passion around his commitment. I have passion around mine, too. I appreciate this time because, for me, it is an opportunity to talk about some of the people who make our province a tremendous place to live. It's a chance for me to talk about people who want to contribute to the success and well-being of their communities. It is a chance for me to talk about small businesses who want to provide a service for their neighbours. It's a chance for me to talk about people who work hard in the hope that they can raise their families to contribute to society. Mr. Speaker, I ran for election because the people in my community needed a voice to speak on their behalf, a person to listen to them, and to understand the small daily challenges of caring for their loved ones. And Mr. Speaker, as minister in this government, I am now privileged to be able to listen to and understand the challenges of people across this province, and to help implement appropriate measures for the benefit of all Nova Scotians. Today, my colleagues in opposition want to highlight a perceived bias on behalf of the province regarding the struggles that people in Amherst are facing due to the difference in the price of gas in New Brunswick. Mr. Speaker, I want to assure all members of this House that border gas pricing will be investigated as part of a public consultation process, which is to be conducted by the Utility and Review Board in the coming months. However, Mr. Speaker, my colleagues in the opposition have chosen to focus on what they perceive as a negative outcome for Nova Scotians. I prefer to focus on the benefits of gas regulation and, in particular, on the impact it has on individual Nova Scotians and rural communities. We have 420 gas stations in this province. Less than half that number existed when regulation ended in 1991. We've all driven by the boarded-up gas stations that litter our province, the vast majority of them in rural or semi-remote areas. I wonder how many people see more than just abandoned pumps. Do they see a small business that no longer exists? Mr. Speaker, do they see a place where students had a summer job pumping gas or working behind the counter? Do they see the loss of municipal and provincial taxes paid to help fund the many services in the community? And Mr. Speaker, when people criticize gas regulation, do they consider such people as Lisa and Brian Boudreau, who founded Caper Gas? Lisa and Brian represent a success story for all Nova Scotians, and one that we should all take pride in. The Boudreaus have taken the time to share their story with my staff, as well as my colleagues in the opposition caucuses. Caper Gas is a small family business. It has open stations that are operated by other small independent business people. While the larger wholesalers are pulling out of smaller communities, Lisa and Brian Boudreau are investing in those communities. They are hiring people, creating jobs in rural Nova Scotia, and injecting capital into the economy, which translates into work for other companies. Most importantly, Mr. Speaker, they are doing all this while making a living in their local community. And all of this is possible because of the stability that gas regulation provides them as they operate their business. It is also important to note that while the Boudreau business is growing, in part due to gas regulation, they are also a fine example of business people who are giving back to their community, a community that has supported them and helped them to succeed. My job, government's job, and the job of all members of this House is to help them to succeed, because they are contributing to Nova Scotia's economy and to their community. That is why maintenance of rural infrastructure, giving those small businesses a fair opportunity to succeed. It is one of the primary objectives of gas regulation. That goal is being achieved, as evidenced by the findings of not one, but 2 independent reports by Michael Gardner. Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt that from time to time a gas station closes, just as they open in another area. But the fact remains the rate of closures prior to regulation was about 2.5 every month. Since regulation, that has fallen to less than 1 a month. Again, Mr. Speaker, the Gardner reports make it clear the policy of helping maintain rural infrastructure has been met. I note with interest that in the summer of 2004, there were meetings conducted by an all-party select committee on petroleum product pricing. This was in response, Mr. Speaker, to public concern over gasoline prices that seemed to rise and fall every second day, even during the day, often without clear reason, and rarely with an explanation. After a series of 5 regional meetings, the committee returned a report which had as one of the recommendations that gas regulation should be based in general on the PEI model, and that is what we have today. Again, Mr. Speaker, the Gardner reports indicate gasoline regulation has addressed price stability by providing motorists with prices that are generally consistent for a week at a time. While I was not privileged to be a member of the House in 2004, I take pride in the fact that the members of this government who served on that select committee have been consistent in supporting the policy. And, Mr. Speaker, as we move forward, this government intends to remain consistent in its position and keep the commitment we made to Nova Scotians. Effective October 1st, 2009, the responsibility for gasoline pricing will be transferred to the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. Our position has always been that the board, an arm's-length, non-political organization, is the proper body to perform this regulatory function. This is in keeping with gasoline regulation in other provinces. While the Gardner report indicates there is no evidence of political influence in the setting of gas prices, this step will remove any doubt surrounding the integrity of this process. And, Mr. Speaker, this is one of the primary reasons why the Utility and Review Board is best suited to consult with Nova Scotians on the issue of gas prices at our border. I would also like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the hard work of the good member from Cumberland North and the strong representation he brings for that riding on behalf of his constituents. The final point I would like to address today, Mr. Speaker, is around the cost of regulation. I'm finished? Oh.
The honourable member for Cumberland South.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that, first of all, I'm very pleased to rise today in regards to resolution number 36 and to what's during a recent election campaign about the Premier and the member for Cumberland North who sits here tonight committed to lowering the gas tax in Amherst. Mr. Speaker, I have to say in almost 12 years, this is the first time I've seen a government come to this House and bring an issue forward that will divide our province.
Shame. Shame.
Mr. Speaker, this is going to put neighbours against neighbours, communities against communities. Make no mistake about it, Mr. Speaker. I want to quote something that the Premier said in the Amherst Daily News this past summer. Now, these are his words. This is a common sense adjustment that can be made in a way that benefits Amherst and border communities. Well, Mr. Speaker, I will bet, and I heard the Honourable Minister just mention a minute ago about issues around fairness and about taxes and communities, and tax on people, what it means to families. Well, Mr. Speaker, I could bring some retailers in here that would strongly disagree with the Premier, strongly disagree with the Minister. In fact, I will invite the Minister to accompany me to Cumberland County, and I'll let her talk to some retailers. No, the Minister of Transportation has already agreed to come. He's coming first. But I'll invite the Honourable Minister to come to Cumberland County with me, and I'll introduce her to some retailers who will tell her this is absolutely the wrong thing to do. Mr. Speaker, first of all, where's the line going to be? Has anybody told us that? Is it between Amherst and Pugwash? Because you can bet if it is, the retailers in Amherst are going to be some upset with their member. If it's between Pugwash and Wallace, look out, because the people in Wallace are coming after you. Mr. Speaker, there's only one way to do this. If this government's considering reducing any taxes, make it province-wide for every Nova Scotian as it should be. Mr. Speaker, I fail, and I think a lot of other members in this House fail to realize, and I'll bet, Mr. Speaker, there are members on that side of the House that are being muzzled by their own Premier ministers, but I'll bet you there are backbenchers sitting here tonight saying, if this goes through, it's going to hurt my community, my retailers, the people I represent. I know there are. Mr. Speaker, passing this off on the Utility Review Board, this government has passed off its responsibility in the last 4 to 5 weeks on many, many issues. Mr. Speaker, this government was elected to make decisions on behalf of all Nova Scotia. The Premier is not a Premier for Amherst. He's not a Premier for Cumberland North. He's a Premier for Nova Scotia. And Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians are expecting him to make those tough decisions that affect every retailer, every Nova Scotian across this province, not to satisfy something that was mentioned during the campaign, Mr. Speaker, which I will use. I'll be very cautious because I do appreciate your position, and I won't say anything that's unparliamentary. But I will say at the very least, a very silly notion to suggest something like this during a campaign that will benefit one community, a very few retailers in the community that is suffering, and I appreciate that very much, Mr. Speaker, but at the expense of the rest of the province. Mr. Speaker, people are traveling from Cumberland County. Where are they going for a lot of them for their groceries? They're going to Moncton. You know what this is going to do? This is going to give them cheaper gas in Amherst to continue on their travels to Moncton. What about gas, cigarette prices? What about milk prices? What about bread prices? Are you going to put that all to the URAB and ask them to look at that as well? People are making choices, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member himself for Cumberland North stated in the Amherst Daily News last week when he was asked, what can you do about cross-border shopping? When his answer was, pretty well nothing. Very little they can do. That was his answer, and I don't disagree with that because the honourable member is right. If people make choices to go to Moncton, for example, to groceries and do their clothing shopping, there's not a lot we can do but other than be competitive in our province. Mr. Speaker, I have to say that and I know a lot of other people, are very, very disappointed in this government to suggest you would pit a community against another one, even within our own county. Now, Mr. Speaker, The Honourable Minister spoke tonight. I thought she was going to tell us where that line was going to be that she's considering. And I will take my place if the Honourable Minister will stand up in her spot and tell this House, where's the line you're talking about? I will take my place. I will take my place and let the Premier get up and say it if he wants. Well, the Premier can stand up right now and tell Nova Scotians where's the line that he's going to draw for different gas prices in Nova Scotia. And I will take my place, Mr. Speaker, and let him answer if he wishes. I will let the Minister do it. I will take my place. The Honourable Minister of Service Nova Scotia can get up right here and say, if you live in Amherst, you're getting cheaper gas. If you live in Spring Hill, tough luck. The Honourable Minister want to get up and answer that? Or Oxford, or Pugwash, or Wallace. These are Nova Scotians who had very difficult times surviving. These are people who are related to one another. These are businesses who have been generations in their business, and they want to be able to compete. They want to be able to survive. But when they're hearing now, you've seen some of the interviews. I know in Spring Hill, a couple of retailers were interviewed. Mr. Speaker, they're going out of business. If this government brings in a different tax rate for Amherst business only,
They're a disgrace.
and the Spring Hill business will pay the price for it, if they're not included, they're closing. And you know whose fault that's going to be? The Premier's, Minister of Service Nova Scotia, and the member who brought up the silly idea during the campaign.
Yeah, silly.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm not so sure this is even legal. No. How can the government tell its residents who are paying taxes, well, guess what? You're going to pay X number of dollars of taxes on a commodity that's being provided, but another jurisdiction is going to pay a lot lower price, and you're going to have to suck it up, basically. Mr. Speaker, I'm not so sure it's legal. And there, you know what, Mr. Speaker, but I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, yes, there are transportation costs. There are transportation costs.
Order, please.
There are transportation costs that affect different areas of this province, and I agree with that, Mr. Speaker, I do. It's a little cheaper to take gas down on Goddison Street than it is to take it in Advocate, Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you, the trucking costs are one thing, but the tax or something else.
Yes.
And I would like for the Minister to tell this House, while she's saying that she's going to send it to the URB, tell this House where the line is, where you expect the line to be. Because I'll tell you this, if it affects the community that I represent in a negative way, that, like the commitment that was made by the Premier to honour commitments that the previous government made, that are obviously I'm seeing now some little bit shaky ground there when he says almost, where I will spend the next whatever amount of time I have in this House, the weeks, the months, or years, reminding this government that they treated Nova Scotians unfairly, that they pitted one community against another. We have municipal politicians right today in Cumberland County, and the honourable member from Cumberland North knows this, that are working very hard to bring our communities together, to work together as Cumberland County, because what's good in Amherst should be good for Parisboro, and what's good for what happens in River Hibbert is good for the people of Oxford. But bringing this kind of foolishness before this House, you're putting one community against another, you're going to divide the communities, and the government that would bring this forward and suggest this should be ashamed of themselves. Should be ashamed of yourselves. Now, I would ask the Honourable Minister to come to Cumberland County with me, and I'll introduce you to some retailers who have had these businesses for a number of years. They are terrified, if they are going to have to pay 6 cents or 4 cents or 8 cents more tax than a neighboring community and retailer will, that they're going to be out of business. Now, you tell their children who are going to trying to go to university, going to school, that are being fed by these people, you come and tell them why they're going to be put out of business.
It's reality.
Why their tax dollars in this province.
Order, please. Order, please. Order. The Honourable Member for Cumberland South has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Minister of Service Nova Scotia a moment ago used the words, the words she used was perceived negative. Well, Mr. Speaker,
He's a political scientist, too, isn't he?
it may be a perceived negative to a minister who's in Halifax, but a business is facing closure, who have children and family to feed and clothe, with the possibility of losing their income, it's not a perceived negative. It's a real negative. And it's a real opportunity for this government to make a right or wrong. A silly notion was made during a campaign to stand here. The Premier should be standing here making a leadership decision and say that he will not put a Nova Scotian against another Scotian because of some foolish notion that was suggested during a campaign to benefit very few people to get elected at the price of other people. You better hope that the people in that constituency, none of them are disadvantaged by this. Because I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm closing, yes, the people in my constituency are disadvantaged. If they are, every chance I can, I'll be raising this House about the unfairness of this government. And don't kid yourselves. People in Cumberland County are aware right now what's going on.
I second.
Mr. Speaker, I think that the Honourable Minister of Service Nova Scotia has an opportunity to stand up here and right or wrong and show that
The Honourable, the time has elapsed. The Honourable, the member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to take part in this debate, firstly because this is my first time at being a critic for municipal affairs and Service Nova Scotia, having spent many times on the opposition benches criticizing governments on health matters. This is the first time, and I'm pleased because it brings, to me anyway, to light something that's a very serious situation in this province. There is no winner. There is never a winner when you pit one area of our province against another area of our province. There are only losers in all cases, Mr. Speaker. Let me clarify a couple of things. First of all, let me clarify what some on the government benches have been saying, is that the differential that we're talking about is a matter of taxes. It is not, Mr. Speaker. Provincial taxes on gas are constant. They stay the same. The differential is there because of a transport allowance. Everybody should know that starting from the very beginning. It helps you deal with it just a little bit better, Mr. Speaker. Let me tell you what, and I think she is a fairly well-known person in this province in terms of speaking out on business issues. Her name is Leanne Hashie, and she was a guest columnist in the Chronicle Herald not too long ago. Here's the first of her column. I think it sums up our whole debate here tonight. In its first real tax test, the NDP government is illustrating it's not yet seeing the forest for the trees, Mr. Speaker. I think that pretty well says it all, Mr. Speaker. What you have here is the case, you have a political matter. You have a case of playing politics with the people of Nova Scotia.
Honourable member, will you table that document that you read from?
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
As I usually do in all cases, as the Minister of Transport and Infrastructure Renewal should know from the amount of time he spent in this House, Mr. Speaker. But I will, Mr. Speaker, this is a case of simply playing politics with the people of Nova Scotia. The NDP and their candidate in Cumberland North promised that they would lower gas prices in that region in order to get a member elected to this House. It's clear cut. And now that they did that, congratulations to the member, you're here. But now, what your government is saying to you is we're not going to honor the promise that you made to your people. What we're going to do now is outsource our responsibility, which is to make a decision. As an elected representative, as a member of government, as a member of the Executive Council, in this government, you are elected to make decisions. But you have decided to outsource that responsibility to the URB. The URB is not, to the best of my knowledge, full of any elected officials. It's going to be a different decision that's going to be made. Mr. Speaker, we have said very clearly, very, very clearly as a Liberal Party that we are not in favour of regulation. And you cannot fix regulation by regulating something else. That is never the solution. And that is exactly what's happening here, Mr. Speaker. This is a better deal for some families, Mr. Speaker, but as the NDP promised, they would have a better deal for all families. Well, this is not a better deal for the people of Glace Bay. It's not a better deal for the people of Spring Hill right now. It's not a better deal for the people of Dartmouth. It's not a better deal for the people of Bible Hill. It's not a better deal for the people of Truro. So far, the only place, supposedly, that this will be a better deal for is the people of Amherst, Mr. Speaker. You create an artificial border. You split the province. No matter how far you cast the net or you draw the line, you're going to leave communities out in the cold. No matter what you do, you're going to have some people who are angry at the government. Now, I would question the wisdom of a government that would start off on their new footing
by making some people angry at them. But I also know at the same time that that's inevitably going to happen, Mr. Speaker. And the minister made reference to the fact that there are 420 stations in Nova Scotia, 420 gas stations. If this plan were to go ahead, as we're talking about, and Amherst was excluded, it would directly benefit only 4 gas stations. If they extended it to Oxford and Spring Hill, that would total 10 stations, Mr. Speaker, out of 420. And I ask you, as this government and as that party has said many, many times in this House, let's be fair. Let's be equitable. Would you call that fair, Mr. Speaker? If you're treating 4 or 10 companies differently than 420, would you describe that as a fair and equitable policy? In anything else that the government does, pick a subject. If you only had that many out of that number, would you consider that to be fair? Any reasonable thinking person, Mr. Speaker, would say the answer is absolutely not. That is not fair. Mr. Speaker, the Premier said that his government is going to work on a plan to reduce the provincial gas tax at stations near the New Brunswick border. And we heard the minister say today they are going to shift that responsibility off to the URB because they don't want to make that decision. And they don't want to make that decision because of the politics involved. The minister actually said that there is a perceived bias out there regarding this situation. Well, there are perceptions out there. You're correct, Madam Minister, you are correct. The perception right now, with most other people that live in this province and who wouldn't live in Amherst, is that you're treating one part of this province differently than the other. I'd say that's a real perception that's out there. There are points of entries from other provinces and from the United States and other parts of this province. They may not be by road, but they are points of entry. And what do we do there? Do we create an artificial border in North Sydney? Do we create an artificial border in Digby? Do we create artificial borders there? No. Why Amherst? Review your file, Madam Minister. Review the whole thing. Ask your government colleagues, ask the member for Cumberland North the real reason why this is taking place. Politics. Politics, politics, politics is the only reason that this is taking place. Mr. Speaker, you know, the easiest thing to do is that if you want to put it all in the hands of the URB, then fine. Put it in the hands of the URB. But I can guarantee you, if you hold public hearings, which you said the URB is going to do, that when you go to other areas of this province and you talk to people, they're going to tell you they want to be treated the same as the people of Amherst. If I get lower gas prices in Amherst, I want lower gas prices in Digby. I want them in North Sydney. I want them in Glace Bay. Of course they would tell you that. Are our provincial rates for community services any different in Amherst than they are in Glace Bay? Absolutely not. People are treated the same across this province, from one end to the other. Are our taxes any different in one area than the other? Are they? Well, tell me where they are. Tell me where they are. Not provincial taxes aren't. Everyone is treated the same in this province. And again, the NDP got what they wanted. You got a member from Cumberland North. You got them there on a false promise, apparently, because you promised the people that you would lower the tax there, but now you're saying you're not going to lower the tax anymore because you're not willing to make a decision, because you don't have the intestinal fortitude to stand up and say, this is why we did it. Mr. Speaker, well, you didn't get what you wanted. You got me back, and I'm glad to be here, Mr. Speaker, because certainly I can point out that this government is headed in the wrong direction, at least in this instance, Mr. Speaker. It's unfair. It's not equitable. It's unfair. It is not fair. It is not right. Indeed, it is as wrong as you can get to treat one Nova Scotian any differently than another Nova Scotian, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much for your time.
The Honourable, the member for Cumberland North.
Mr. Speaker, it's an honour to take my place here today to speak to this resolution introduced by the Liberal member.
Point of order. The Honourable, the Opposition House Leader.
that you said that the member's time was up.
No,
so
I
the
said
debate.
2 minutes. And oh, I'm sorry. If I misled the member, I apologize. The member has till 5:24. The Honourable, the member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I apologize. My apologies for the mix-up. I thought that I had used up all my time, and I had not. But certainly, even with 30 seconds remaining, 10 or 15, regardless how many seconds are remaining, it's still wrong, Mr. Speaker. It's still wrong.
The time has elapsed for debate on this resolution. The Honourable, the House Leader for the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call resolution number 65?
Resolution number 65.
Pardon me? No, there isn't.
No.
No, we're last on the resolution.
We were the last.
Thanks.
That part I got right. The Honourable, the member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise and say a few words on Resolution 65. The operative clause says, therefore, it be resolved that members of the House of Assembly urge government to inform this chamber of its infrastructure plans and priorities immediately and table this plan in the House. Well, Mr. Speaker, allow me to take us back a couple years. Back in 2007, the federal government announced the Building Canada Fund. In this Building Canada Fund, Mr. Speaker, the federal government had announced this new infrastructure program. The priorities for funding would include our national highway system, drinking water, wastewater, public transit, green energy, and recreation. Again, it's also necessary to point out that these projects that were going to be recognized, and I'll table this after I'm done, was going to be looked by a joint panel from the federal and provincial government to look at the applications that were submitted. Something that's also important to recognize, under the Canada Building Fund, there are two components. The first one is called the Major Infrastructure Component, the MIC component, which basically target large strategic projects of national and regional significance. And the other component would focus on projects in communities with population of less than 100,000, helping these smaller communities face, naturally, their unique challenges. Mr. Speaker, looking at the fund that was announced, Nova Scotia was going to receive $235.68 million of federal funding. $235 million. Naturally, those dollars would have to be matched by either the province or municipal units or universities or the different communities. So looking again at that $235 million coming from the federal government, that money was basically divided into those two components. Under the communities component, to help communities with population of less than 100,000 people, $37 million of federal dollars was set aside. And under the major infrastructure component, $198.68 million, and this is federal dollars that was set aside under this program. Now, naturally, when this program was rolled out in November of 2007, this infrastructure money announced by the federal government was to help our struggling economy across our country, and especially here at home in Nova Scotia. It was supposed to help stimulate our economy by creating much-needed jobs here at home. We've heard time and time again this infrastructure funding was going to create a lot of short-term jobs that were desperately needed and still are. And it was also going to create much long-term care jobs as well. We can all recall hearing our former Premier talking about this funding. It was the largest infrastructure program in the history of our province. We heard politicians talking about ready-to-go projects. We heard, the famous quote, the shovel-ready projects. The excitement that was created was overwhelming. Nova Scotians were excited. The list of projects that were being proposed or talked about was extensive. We've heard of possible schools being, new schools being built, renovated, hospitals, jails, rinks, libraries, sewer and water projects, and of course, roads and bridges, to name some. Mind you, Mr. Speaker, everybody had their list ready. Our provincial government had theirs, our municipal units, our school boards, our universities, and others. Well, of course, from all the discussions, our party tried to get a list from the province back in 2008, what the priority list was for our province. Again, the Premier at the time told us that this priority list would be made available in March of 2009. Now, again, program was announced in November 2007, and the Premier told us, the former Premier, that this list would be made available in March of 2009. Because everybody wanted to know what projects were going to, what projects were submitted and what projects were going to be approved. So, lo and behold, we're still waiting for that list. So I hope maybe this Premier will undertake to make the Nova Scotia priority list available. So again, everybody in Nova Scotia is still waiting to see the infrastructure priority list. Now, again, many questions were raised along the way. How is the province going to distribute this funding across our province? Should all regions be treated equally? So the question still remains. How is this money going to be distributed across our province? Now, normally the cost of infrastructure projects is a three-way split, with each partner putting up 33% of the cost. However, the funding agreement for projects may vary, can be split two ways, 50-50, 60-40. Again, the arrangement is basically left to be negotiated. I understand my time is fastly approaching to a close, but again, looking back, November 2007, the Canada Building Fund was announced, and it was on May 1st, 2009, that the first announcement was made. So again, when I look back at this first announcement, May 1st, 2009, $210 million in federal funding was announced, matched by the province, so we were looking at a total of $422 million. Yes, there's been some more announcements since. I understand there was another one made today. So again, in closing, I would encourage the minister to table that list of infrastructure priorities for our province, whatever is convenient for him. So again, Mr. Speaker, I will certainly have a chance to continue my discussion at a later time. Thank you again.
The Honourable, the Minister for Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member opposite for bringing forth this important topic so that we can discuss on the floor of this historic legislature resolution number 65. Since coming to the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal, Mr. Speaker, I want you to know I've had the opportunity of learning a great deal about infrastructure challenges and the future ahead for opportunities which we have in Nova Scotia. As many members of this House would know, Nova Scotia, unfortunately, has some of the oldest infrastructure in the country, which of course results in challenges and some tough decisions that are going to be made. Mr. Speaker, there are 23,000 kilometers of roads in this beautiful province, and as you can appreciate, keeping those roads in good condition takes a great deal of both time, money, and planning. We can't understate the importance of making sure that we have a solid network of infrastructure in our province. And I take the member from Glace Bay at his word when we look at the infrastructure in our province, from Cape Breton to Yarmouth, from the border across the Tantramar Marsh to, of course, the HRM. We know how important these roads and buildings are to communities and to our economy. Good infrastructure connects our communities, whether it's a strong highway system in today's world, more importantly, another highway system, the information highway system, the internet. Mr. Speaker, we've spoken to communities, to citizens and their elected leaders, and we have listened to them. We know there are needs right across the province. Our goal is to work with communities, work with people and make decisions that benefits them and support their goals for the places they live and work. And at this time, I want to thank the members of my caucus and members opposite who have taken the time over the short time that we have been in government, and I say short time because time is flying by here. I want you to know that members opposite have come and visited with me in my office as the Energy Minister and as the Transportation Minister and brought their concerns forward. And members of my caucus continue to do that. That's going to make sure that we'll continue to make the correct decisions. We made a decision earlier this year that reflects our commitment to the people of this province, and I'd like to have the opportunity to talk about it at this time. We decided to embark on the largest highway construction program in this province's history. Let's be clear on that. And I know that in the last number of months there were commitments that crossed my desk, and I know the Deputy Minister on many occasions said to me, "It's amazing, you never ask what constituency they're in." I look at where the jobs are, I look at the need for these roads, I look at the staff, and I realize they are making important decisions. This season, millions are being, in this construction season I should point out, millions are being invested to build and improve roads right across the province. These projects may be a few kilometers of paving or the construction of new highways, but regardless of the size, each project is vital to the people who use these roads and to the people who are working hard to attract new businesses to these areas or to bring visitors to their areas, to expose them to the impressive sights that we find all about this wonderful province of ours. These projects are bringing a lasting benefit to Nova Scotians. And members opposite should very clearly know, and I've had them say to me privately, I don't expect them necessarily to say to me publicly, but I do know that the previous member from Inverness, and I wish him all the best with the decision he's made, he committed and wrote a very complimentary letter through a rather personal issue that I was involved with a number of weeks ago, where he took the time to put in writing he appreciated all of the good work that I had continued to proceed in Inverness. That's, after all, making sure that an important part of this province that is currently or was currently served by the previous Premier does not get forgotten. It's determined as a priority, it's determined as something that should be done, and those projects went ahead. They help each traffic congestion, they make roads safer, they support our economy. We're making decisions that are going to make sure that across this province, people feel that they are being listened to. The work undertaken this construction season has been made possible because of some good, tough decisions that have to be made based upon budgetary priorities. And of course, there are projects going outside of my department. This includes vital water and wastewater projects, construction of a new community college campus, affordable housing, new construction of schools. One in particular, it was with great delight, I want you to know, that when it finally crossed my desk and I looked at the plans for Glace Bay School, I very clearly looked at it and I thought, for one reason or another, I thought that school was to be named after somebody else, but I want the member to know that was a good moment for him, a good moment for your community, and a good moment for me as the new minister to make sure that that was something that I could sign off on. And of course, Mr. Speaker, we can't forget the new home construction rebate introduced by this government, the new construction rebate, which has proved to be very popular. As members of this House would know, this is a program that kick-started the new home construction business, benefiting both home builders and new homeowned builders. Mr. Speaker, I'm also pleased to report that we are taking a green approach to new infrastructure in the province. In August, my colleague, the Minister of Environment, announced a $1.4 million project for the construction of a new green building. This building will meet stringent standards for energy efficiency, and I did have the privilege of touring one of the great new facilities at the NSCC across the harbour. I encourage members opposite and members of my caucus to attend, call the principal, she'll have you in there in a moment, or the president, she'll have you in there in a moment to see that new building. This is an approach that we're committed to bringing to provincial construction projects. We're building to a high standard to make sure that infrastructure we build today is not a burden for our children tomorrow. Now, Mr. Speaker, there is another legacy we want to leave for the future, and that is an economy that's not burdened by excessive debt. Mr. Speaker, this has been a busy summer for builders of all kinds in this province, from one end to the other. and we want to keep them busy for years to come. However, we need to do this responsibly. We need to live within our means. We know in the future we'll face some significant challenges in reaching those goals. Mr. Speaker, we recognized a long time ago that careful planning would be key to good decision making. Regardless of the issue, you've got to make sure you have the facts before you can make the good decision. That's why we made a commitment to develop a 5-year road improvement plan. This is the plan that will give careful consideration to the needs and priorities across the province from one end of the province to the other. We're developing this plan and we will share it with all Nova Scotians when it is ready. We are also working to develop a broader plan for the province's infrastructure needs. I've had the opportunity to share with Minister McKay the announcement. I've been in contact with Minister Baird by phone at this time, and I look forward to meeting him in the future on the plans of the federal government. So in closing, Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt the needs are great. They must be balanced with the physical results of realities of the province, but we're committing to work with Nova Scotians to make the best decisions possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable, the member for Yarmouth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to rise in my place and speak on Resolution 65. Mr. Speaker, it must be made abundantly clear for all Nova Scotians the importance of seeing the new government's infrastructure plan. Because to date, with the exception of a federal announcement with the Honourable Peter MacKay and a series of announcements between mid-July and mid-August by the Minister of Transportation, this government has been exceptionally quiet on their infrastructure plans. Our government announced a $1.9 billion infrastructure fund. Our government was getting down to business. This year alone, the economy in the recovery-style mode of $334 million was to go into Nova Scotia communities. Yes, we were working with the federal government, and I will point out a few of the projects we announced. Phase 2, the twinning of Highway 104, the upgrade of Lower South River Bridge, Heatherton Bridge, Little Bedore Bridge, Milford Overpass, and the Fairview Overpass. Infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, is a vital part of Nova Scotia's economy and is critical to sustaining and developing our communities. But the NDP government remains coy despite the fact upgrading and twinning more sections of our provincial highway system should be priorities for the government of Nova Scotia. Today, we are simply asking for the plan since they came to government and a copy of their upcoming plans. Mr. Speaker, our caucus was very pleased with the announcement we heard last week of the $100 million in partnership with the federal government and the Honourable Peter MacKay. But Mr. Speaker, I would like to mention, and there's members on that side of the House, and I have not heard one word from any of them, in Southwest Nova, in the South Shore, there was no announcements of any sort from the Digby to Weymouth area that needs an upgrade, seriously needs an upgrade. The 103, there was no announcement on any of those, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, transportation is the backbone of growing the economy of Nova Scotia, and Southwest Nova deserves to have the same treatment as any other part of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. Maybe the members on the government benches are quiet and they'll just follow suit with whatever the government says. But I will stand up for the people of the South Shore and of Southwest Nova, Mr. Speaker. We have Bay Ferries that is in serious trouble, Mr. Speaker. We have the Digby Ferry that is on life support today, Mr. Speaker. We have Bay Ferries in Yarmouth that is on life support. Mr. Speaker, they need some answers and they need some help and they need it from this government today. Today, Mr. Speaker. We have a new air service in our airport in Yarmouth. We need some more support from this government. And this government is sitting on their hands and doing absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. To grow our economy in Southwest Nova, Mr. Speaker, we all must step up to the plate and work together. And I believe that if we all want to do that, it can be done. But the government has to show the leadership and do that, Mr. Speaker. We need more new schools. We need to keep building more healthcare centres, new facilities for our water and sewer, sidewalks for our seniors, community centres, our fire halls in Nova Scotia, and I forget the number of volunteer fire departments. Our government was committed to those volunteer firemen. Mr. Speaker, as you're well aware of that. And members of the House are well aware of that. But there's been no announcement to the volunteer fire sector. What are they doing with them? They are a critical part of our economy. And they're volunteers, Mr. Speaker. They risk their lives every day to save their neighbour. And what are we doing? We are doing absolutely nothing. We're not making any announcements of any sort to help any of these volunteer groups. Our community centres that we have in our, are the backbone of rural communities. What are we doing for them? Absolutely nothing. Where is the plan so Nova Scotians will know exactly where this government is? Or is it going to be more backroom deals? Mr. Speaker, that's a very clear question. Would somebody maybe like for me to take my seat and answer that? Because we do not have it. Members on this side of the House have not seen any plan. And I think that all Nova Scotians deserve to have that plan, Mr. Speaker. And the Premier made it very clear when he was running his election that he would live to the commitments that was made by the previous government. And now he's backpedaling onto those. Almost all, Mr. Speaker. Almost all. Well, we would like to know what almost all means. And when will we know that? We heard statements today by ministers here in the House that meant nothing. We heard the Minister of Environment stand in his place today and said the issue's resolved in Southwest Nova. Well, I tell you, I will take that message home when I go back home on Friday, and I will let the people know that that minister's got it resolved, because nobody in Southwest Nova knows it's resolved yet, Mr. Speaker. So what is the resolve of it? And infrastructure throughout other parts of this province, Mr. Speaker. We need better highway systems. We need better infrastructure throughout the province. When I was the Minister of Service Nova Scotia, we had a list that long of infrastructure that was needed and shovel-ready projects by municipalities across the province. If we have this abundance of money that we want to get rid of and start growing the economy, there's a good place to do it. And partner with the municipalities, Mr. Speaker. And it's free money. You can go borrow free money, so we should keep doing that. You know, it's free. And the taxpayers will not have this burden for our children and for our grandchildren, Mr. Speaker, to have that burden. According to the Premier, it's free. Well, I think that someday reality will set in and they'll know that it's not free, Mr. Speaker. And I can tell you that I'm not going to go, well, I don't have a mortgage, but if I did have a mortgage on my home, I would not be paying next year's payments onto it. Yeah, I would go to the Premier and get that mortgage because it's interest-free. It's interest-free, Mr. Speaker. Anyhow, Mr. Speaker, there's numerous projects I could talk about that needs the attention of this government. There are members on that bench that are muzzled and will not stand up and say anything in their own writings of issues that I have not heard one member from the South Shore, and I see the Minister of Community Services laughing over there. I have not seen her stand in this place and say one thing about the 103. I have not heard the member from Shelburne. I have not heard the member from Queens stand in their place and say one thing about the 103. But when they sat over here, Mr. Speaker, that was their priority. The 103 was the priority. Where is it today? Why will they not have the backbone to stand in their place and to support the people of their community that's asking for it, Mr. Speaker? Every council along that South Shore has made that a #1 priority. And what are they doing? Now they're on that side of the House. Their muzzles on. They're not allowed to speak. We heard it today from the Premier. He didn't want his minister to speak. Well, I'm sure the backbenchers will never get a chance to speak. Maybe they're just sitting there thinking, if I'm quiet enough and I prove to the Premier that I can't speak at all, he'll move me to the front bench, Mr. Speaker. Well, that's how it is, Mr. Speaker. But anyhow, the people of Nova Scotia need a plan, Mr. Speaker, and we are determined that we'll keep ragging on the government until they have the plan for Nova Scotians.
For Cape Breton South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And following that, those remarks. I welcome the opportunity to join in the debate on Resolution 65.
Order, please. The honourable member for Cape Breton South has the floor.
I might say, in listening to the debate going here today, and particularly on this resolution and others, I go back to the time in this House when I was first elected as a member back 1993, and before that I had the quite lengthy career as Mayor of Sydney, over 15 years. So my point, I guess, starting off is that I've been around politics now going on 32 years, and I've had 11 elections, including 1 acclamation. And the scene changes over the years. When I was mayor in Sydney, these problems that come up with infrastructure and that are the responsibility of the City of Sydney totally, in most cases with some funding arrangements with the province or the federal government. And when I first got elected as the representative for Cape Breton South, I only had the old City of Sydney. Now my constituency encompasses a rural, suburban, urban mix, and that my constituency has shifted to areas like Westmount, Coxseed, Sydney River, Point Edward, Balls Creek, all areas that are serviced by the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal. So it's a lot different than when you're dealing with the municipal government and the City of Sydney in terms of municipal infrastructure. A lot of these are J-class roads, and I just want to say that in the past number of years, I've looked at my constituency and I said that something has to be done, Mr. Speaker, with the condition of the roads in my constituency.
Order, please.
That are not bounded by the old City of Sydney, rather that are in the rural area and suburban area of my riding. And in particular, in the past couple of years, I worked with the municipal councillor there to look at
the honourable member for Cape Breton South has the floor.
These roads fixed. And I had great cooperation from the previous government in respect to applications that I made to have some roads in my riding fixed. Some of those roads, Mr. Speaker, were gravel. Some of them were with open ditches. Some of them had sewer problems, all of the above. The old county of Cape Breton were looking after themselves, and for one reason or another over the years, these roads didn't get up to standards. And the only thing that went up to standard was the increase in taxes in those areas, and the services didn't increase. So anyway, the last couple of years, Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity to discuss many projects with the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal, and I was successful in negotiating a number of things. And one in particular was a combination of an effort between the member from Cape Breton North and myself regarding the need to renew Celtic Drive, which was a project that was probably about $5 million between the two sections. And it's all done now with the cooperation of the Provincial Department of Transportation, the member from Cape Breton North, and the councillors involved in his area and my area. So those are the kinds of things we got done, Mr. Speaker, and I'm leading up to something here, is that there were other streets that were done with cooperation and something that the rural part of my riding didn't feel they were ever going to get done. Some gravel roads were paved, and I look at places like Wendy Street, Martell Street in Westmount. I look at streets that hadn't been looked at in 50 years, Waterview Drive and other streets in Coxseed, Sydney River Bridge, and the need to do something with the twinning of the Highway 125 was addressed, the bypass, and all of those things were successfully completed with cooperation between cross-party lines between the member of Cape Breton North, his party, and our party. In this instance, realizing that our constituencies bordered one another in a lot of cases, and my constituency comes close to bordering yours, Mr. Speaker, in some of the areas. But anyway, to the minister, I issued a request this year for some infrastructure renewal projects to cover off some of these streets that are in bad repair in our area. And I think of streets like Wiedner Drive, Lynch Drive, Duncan Drive, Hillview Drive, the need to do something more in the Point Edward area. And those are all documented, and they're on the minister's or in the minister's department now. And I would hope that the same cooperation will come from this minister that came from the last Minister of Transportation in addressing my concerns in Cape Breton South. And I might add, Mr. Speaker, that having been around this House a long time, some would think too long, but I guess I'm just getting energized again because I've been on all sides of this House. I've been in government. I've been a backbencher in government. I've been a minister in government. I've been in official opposition. I've been in the third party. But there's one thing I haven't lost sight of. It's the need to do something in my riding all the time. I'm here to represent the people of Cape Breton South. And I can tell you, when I get exercised enough during the debate on estimates, I will do what I so often do in the past, is do an analysis of the members opposite and give my opinion of who's going to be here after the next election and who isn't. So, and I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that I'll be here after the next election, and I'll give a seat-by-seat projection over there before this House rises, sometime in December or January, Mr. Speaker, because even though this crew has a majority government, they're not getting out of here easily this fall, because we're here to debate the business of Nova Scotia for Nova Scotians, and we intend to do that. Mr. Speaker, and our caucus, and I'm sure that the caucus to my left here, and that's a strange thing to say about this caucus to my left, but anyway, the caucus to my left will be keeping this, holding this government to account. And I'm going to tell you there's going to be some very interesting weeks in the near future. And I'll close by saying this to the minister. I would hope that he would take my concerns back to his department. There is a list of streets sitting on your desk, Mr. Minister, somewhere. Please just call me up and tell me they're going to be done, okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will now call on the Minister of Transportation and Public Works for the hours of tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the House Leader, I wish to announce tomorrow's hours are from 2 to 6. Budget speech will be the highlight of the day, if I can put it that way. And after question period, we'll go back to speeches and reply.
Thank you. The motion before the House is that the House shall now rise and meet again tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor? Against? The motion is carried. The hour of adjournment is upon us, and we will start the debate. The motion for tonight is, therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate the staff of Whitney Pier Youth Club, who provide exceptional programming for youth in Whitney Pier area for over 15 years. The Honourable, the member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to stand in my place tonight and talk about such a place that has a great place in my heart, the young people of Whitney Pier and the Whitney Pier Youth Club. The Whitney Pier Youth Club, Mr. Speaker, is a youth-oriented society. It's a non-profit registered charity since 1994, when I had the privilege of being the executive director and opened the doors. And I think of from the time it is in 1994 until present, and all the valuable services that are, and the hard times that we went through. But today I rise in my place to speak about the new executive director, Chester Borden, and the wonderful job what he's doing with the youth in the community, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for years, the Whitney Pier Youth Club provided Breakfast for Learning. You know, it was the Breakfast for Learning program that was not offered in the schools in the area. So at that time, the board of directors and myself decided that we would offer the Breakfast for Learning program. We also had a lunch program. You know, Mr. Speaker, we probably served over 100,000 lunches in the time that I've been there, and they probably served well over 100,000 by now since I have left, since becoming the member for the Cape Breton Nova. Mr. Speaker, it was an ordinary building. It was one time it was a church, a Presbyterian church hall, way back in the day, and what happened was it got turned into this. It became a very, I guess, well-orientated machine from the former board of directors with Diane Lewis at the helm. Diane Lewis was on the board. She was on the board, and I think back in the early board with Darlene McPhee Jennings. I think of Constable Graham Smith. I think of Mike Morrison. I think of all those, Lem Skeets, Lorne Green, all of those people that got together and realized that we have to do something about the youth in our community. So what better way was to take this hall that nobody was using, it was abandoned, it was rat infested, it was full of oil, you know, and take this old building and turn it into what I say today is the most successful youth center in this province. We provide over 100 different themes and different items during the year, Mr. Speaker, to that club. Chester Board, the new executive director, is a youth worker like myself. He went to Holland College to become a youth worker and is providing great services to his community. His staff are Mark Gardner. Mark is the recreation coordinator. Janie Weber is another coordinator for health. They have hip-hop, dance, taekwondo, weightlifting, computers. I can go on and on about all the different programs, but you know, Mr. Speaker, no, my hip-hop days are long gone, Mr. Speaker. You know, but the whole thing is it's always brimming with youth, Mr. Speaker. There's always youth there every day. The whole thing is where it's located at that time was between an elementary school, a junior high school, and the new elementary school. So right now it's even the point of that the